Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. 15 minutes after 9 o'clock. This is News and Views right here on Salam Media. And next we'll be talking with the director of Open Secrets. He is Hennie van Vuuren. And we're going to be looking at the extradition of the arrested Gupta brothers from the UAE to South Africa. Hennie, a very good morning to you. Welcome. And tell us very briefly, what is Open Secrets all about?
Yes, good morning, Julie, and good morning to the listeners and viewers. Open Secrets is a non-profit organization where I work. We investigate primarily big corporate actors and their various enablers in government and in political parties who profit from economic crime and related human rights abuses. And we'll look at ways to use the law to hold these various actors to account.
You hold them to account, but are you able to get back the money that they've stolen from the taxpayers and from the country?
Yeah, absolutely, Julie. I think it's a crucial question of reparations and restitution, whether those are the crimes of the profiteers of apartheid or the profiteers of arms deal or state capture. I think there we know that civil society groups cannot actually go back and take back their money. We rely on competent state authorities and competent state institutions to do that. So we spend a lot of time trying to push for holding those institutions, those regulators to account so that they do that kind of hard work on our behalf.
Okay, so now we go to the very sore point in every South African side, and that is the state capture issue and the key figures in that drama as it played out here in our country. As you and I speak, the Gupta brothers are imprisoned in the UAE, in Dubai to be specific. Do we know if they are still in prison, Hennie, or are they out on bail?
Julie, my understanding is that they are in fact still in custody. Not sure what custody does look like for them. I doubt it's hard living at the moment, but they certainly are in custody. And I think that the big legal battle, the first legal battle that we face now, is their attempt to be able to obtain bail. They no doubt want that, and to state very clearly, the Guptas have used the money which they've stolen from the South African people to build themselves bolt holes, hideaway places across the world. We know that they have a strong network of business and other associates in India, in countries like Uzbekistan, and they've used places like Hong Kong for their money laundering purposes, just like they have the United Arab Emirates. And so there is a very strong likelihood that if they were to be awarded bail by the UAE authorities, that they may very well run. And that is why it's crucial that the South African authorities and the National Prosecuting Authority needs to work incredibly hard to ensure that this first step is found successful in the Gupta's favor, and they are granted bail. They need to remain in custody, I think we would argue, until this extradition process is in fact finalized.
Okay, Hennie, I'm not a legal eagle by any means, but I'm kind of wondering, let's assume that something goes wrong, they slip through the cracks. Is there any way that we could follow the paper trail from South Africa and try and attach all of their assets in payment of all of the money they've stolen from South Africa and almost brought us to our knees? Is that a possibility, or do they need to come to South Africa to answer to those cases?
Well, Julia, to be clear, I'm not a lawyer either, so that makes two of us. But certainly, we have an appreciation for the law, and in this particular instance, it's very clear that we know what we know about. Let's just step back for a second. We know much more about the way in which the Guptas moved their money around the world because of the Zondo Commission. So last year, evidence was presented at the Zondo Commission by an independent investigator from a non-profit organization, Paul Holden, and he showed convincingly, using data that had been gathered by the commission, that approximately 16 billion rand had been stolen by the Guptas and moved through what are called shell companies, basically front companies, set up primarily in places like the United Arab Emirates, Bermuda in the Caribbean, and Hong Kong. So these are places, jurisdictions that are often used as secrecy havens. They require very little disclosure from people who bank their money there. And it has become a haven for very wealthy people. Some of them are criminals like the Guptas, to stash their cash so that they don't have to pay tax, or that they aren't, their cash can't be traced by authorities in the countries where they have committed a crime. So, keeping that in mind, Julie, I think that what the Guptas have done is created a very complex network around the world to hide that cash. It will be very hard for any authority, South African authority, to track that down. It will no doubt be helpful to ensure that they are in fact extradited, not just because we need justice to be seen to be done in South Africa and to affirm the rule of law, but also to be able to put all these hard questions to them in an open court, and to assist the process of asset forfeiture. But there is no reason why the South African authorities can't and should not be very aggressively pursuing the money flows. And, it does beg the question, Julie, why the South African authorities have not been banging on the door of the United Arab Emirates, not only to ask for the Guptas in their physical form, but to say, give us all the bank account details you have. And there's no doubt that the UAE authorities have a massive amount of detail of the money laundering network the Guptas have created. And to add, Julie, the same applies in places like Hong Kong, for example, and to demand the return of that cash. I think we've seen a lackluster performance by the National Prosecuting Authority. And quite frankly, we can talk a little bit more about it, but it's tantamount to bungling, both in terms of bringing the Guptas back and also in terms of returning all the stolen money to the South African people. And that has to change.
I'm wondering if the reluctance is due to the fact that should the Guptas come back to South Africa, extradited to South Africa to answer for state capture, it's going to take down a lot of other high-profile people as well. There's going to be a lot of naming and shaming, finger pointing, and high-placed individuals, including politicians. So that could be one of the reasons, could it not?
Well, Juliet, it could very well. We could draw that inference. I mean, I would like to give our law enforcement agencies somewhat of the benefit of the doubt. And, to do that, the law simply requires that this is what's followed. Our constitution requires that this is what's followed. And, the ordinary justice being achieved the same way in which we punish somebody for not paying their taxes or for running over a red robot. Surely some group of people who have orchestrated crimes against the South African people, which together with their political enablers around the Zuma family, and of course the big companies, the South African auditing companies and the global auditing companies and the big banks, they ensured that approximately 2 million South Africans were driven into poverty. During the state capture period, Julie. So to be very clear, there's an extraordinary historic debt that's owed to the South African people, and I think little bits of political infighting and attempts to protect corrupt venal politicians, we cannot allow that to be a reason for this. I would argue at the moment there may be that motive by some people, but the primary motive at the moment is, quite frankly, a staggering incompetence from the side of the crisis-ridden National Prosecuting Authority led by Advocate Shamila Batoy. They have now sent a legal team, having not even announced the arrest of the Guptas to the South African people. We had to learn from that, from a tweet from the Dubai authorities, despite the fact that many journalists and others had already got wind of their arrest about 4 or 5 days before that announcement. So the NPA must have been informed, as was Minister Lamola. Instead of even announcing that to the South African people, they left that up to the UAE to send a tweet. And then instead of sending a very competent team, Julie, of lawyers to the United Arab Emirates to deal with it, they've sent a senior counsel by the name of Advocate Anton Katz from Cape Town. Now, he's obviously a senior counsel, has a fair amount of experience. He's no human rights lawyer, firstly. And secondly, he does not have any competence when it comes to the intricacies of state capture. There are many fine women and men working for the NPA and have been working at the Zondo Commission who could have been sent to go in there and in a way, lead the fight, the legal fight of the NPA's life. This is one of the most important legal challenges they face. And they've sent, quite frankly, the B team to go and do that. And that makes one wonder why the National Director of Public Prosecutions and her team would allow something like this to happen. And if anything, they are, quite frankly, condoning a process that may very well lead to us not, having the most effective legal team in place to ensure the return of the Guptas.
So, what sort of pressure or noises do we make as civil society to ensure that the right people go across and bring these scoundrels back to answer for state capture? And having said that as well, would you know what sort of processes will then be in place? Let's assume we've got the right people in Dubai to
Yeah.
extradite the Guptas back to South Africa. What are the legal steps that need to be taken for them to get here? And we we definitely are dragging our heels on this matter. This should have happened the moment the announcement was made. These guys should have been in South Africa right here and now as we speak to answer for their heinous misdeeds.
Indeed, Julie. So, when we dial back a little bit, we know the outgoing head of the Independent Investigative Directorate, Advocate Hermione Cronje at the NPA.
Mm,
She put out what's called a red notice. So basically, it's an international calling card to say that we want these criminals to be returned. It works through an international organization called Interpol. That was the end of February. The Dubai authorities were astoundingly quick to respond to the South Africans, from what I know, in the first week of March, to say, look, we are, give us some more details about the Guptas, although we believe they knew all of this, but they were going through the motions at that point. It then took the South African authorities 81 days till the 21st of May to even respond to them. And so that was a heel dragging, I believe, that was effectively enabled the whole process to be delayed, exactly like you say. We would have had the Guptas potentially sooner in the country than we will. And that again points to the fact that we are, I think, have the potential, rather, we run the risk, if not keeping pressure on the NPA and the police to do their jobs, and Minister Lamola as the Minister of Justice. Why was he not breathing down the neck of the police every day to say, have you answered the Dubai authorities? If not, why not? It was very basic information that they were supposed to provide. So maybe that's the first point, is that accountability means keeping pressure on institutions, not because we want them to fail, but precisely because we need them to succeed in the public interest, Julie. And then, of course, it's recognizing that the extradition process, as you said, what lies ahead now, even if we were to have a competent legal team in place, there'll be, after the bail hearing, there'll be an extradition hearing based on some of the evidence that the NPA has presented thus far. That's around the Nulane state capture scheme in the Free State. They can now add additional charges to that. But here's the thing, the United Arab Emirates, and Dubai in particular, is unfortunately not a democracy as we understand it in South Africa. It is a society that does not have an independent judiciary. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Independence of the Judiciary reported some years ago that the political head, and therefore the king and his cabinet, make all the most important decisions as to what will happen in the courts in any event. So we don't only have a huge legal battle ahead, we have a political battle. And then it comes to the question of Minister Lamola and President Ramaphosa and others. Are they speaking to the counterparts in this country, which frankly is very clearly not a democratic society? And are they pushing them hard to ensure that the Guptas are indeed extradited? I don't think we should imagine that this is a normal society in which the lawyers are operating. In fact, it's a very abnormal society.
And I think for the benefit of all of the South Africans, knowing, as you've indicated, this whole state capture issue has pushed 2 million people into abject poverty. It's literally crippled our country. This type of information, we should be kept updated by the NPA or Lamola and his team, Minister Lamola and his team, or whoever is responsible for keeping us as South Africans updated on this particular issue, because we need to get back the stolen money. We need to get this country back onto its feet. That being said, also, Hennie, how come the third brother hasn't been arrested as yet. And apart from Open Secrets, which other civil society NGO, NPO is keeping a beady eye on this issue? We can't let this slip through our fingers. These people need to be held account. We need to get our money back into the country.
Absolutely, Julie. On your last point, we need to hold these criminals to account, because we know that the elites, and particularly in the banks and the some of the auditors and some of the law firms who profited from state capture, those people are comfortably drinking their coffees in Santon and other places in London this morning, knowing that they'll go on holiday at the end of the year from money that they too basically made out of the state capture stolen wealth. So it's about ensuring accountability for the Guptas, but about challenging a system that operates globally. And I don't say that in the current conspiratorial sense, but rather to say, let's be very clear, there's a system of enablers or professionals around the world who make corruption like this possible. And we need to strike a blow against this entire network to prevent the reoccurrence, because it will happen again. The greed that allowed this to happen will manifest again. So it is manifesting, is there, is present, and I think will manifest through a new phase potentially of state capture. So that is why I think we need to keep up the pressure. There's certainly organizations like Open Secrets, I think Salam Media, many others in the media need to keep up that pressure, and ask Advocate Batoy and ask our members of parliament, why are they not holding the NPA to account? Why are they not holding the Minister of Justice to account, and make them come and report regularly on what are one of the largest crimes. Right now, I think we're rightly focusing on the money that the president has hidden in his couch. I think there is many questions that the president needs to ask, Julie. I think the risk, though, is we become so focused on the minutiae of one political moment that we end up, in a way, ignoring huge currents that are taking place at the moment, and looking at the Gupta accountability for the Guptas and where the pressure needs to be. So that pressure has to be sustained from different sectors and different segments of society, and very clearly we need to ask of the minister and the NPA, don't tell us that we should trust you. Don't tell us that you've got this. You have to show us that you have that. You have to be ahead of the problem, because that is the way the South African people are not fools. We will trust you based on the evidence that you give us that you are doing your jobs. Right now, I fear, Julie, they are not doing their jobs. They are not fully committed to this process. And we need to keep up the pressure to turn that around.
Well, I do hope that Hennie van Vuuren and the rest of the team at Open Secrets are holding that flag up for us, that you are putting pressure on the NPA, on Minister Lamola, and just keeping this alive. We here at Salam Media will do all we can to keep these stories alive and in the minds of the people, lest we forget and then all of this slips through our fingers. My last question to you, I did ask the question earlier on, but let's just go back to it again. How come the third brother has not been arrested? And what about all the other South African nationals that were under the Gupta spell, who have also fled the country and have set up massive palaces for themselves in Dubai? Are we going to be able to get them to come back to South Africa and account as well?
Yeah, so Julia, absolutely. I think it's a crucial question. As we know, two of the brothers were the red notice that was issued was only for two of those brothers. There's sufficient evidence, I would argue, and we've got that from the Zondo Commission process and elsewhere, to have included the third brother. I think the question could be extended, as you say, to the lieutenants like Salimessa, who, from what we understand, is still resident in Dubai. The Dubai authorities know of him, and they know how the companies in Dubai have worked with the Guptas, the Essas, and others to create those money laundering networks. And we should extend that to the partners, the wives of the Gupta brothers. Our understanding was that was the intention of the NPA at some point, to include them. And why that hasn't happened is a question that should be asked of the National Director, Advocate Shamila Batoy. I think what she wants is a couple of easy wins so that she can continue to draw a very big salary every month and go nicely into retirement in 2 years' time. And in fact, what we want as the South African people is that systemic change. That means we have to nab the whole darn lot and their network of enablers. So let's ensure that that there aren't going to be any easy wins here, and I think the rest of these two brothers is only the start of far bigger, more sustained action that is required, and is by no means would by no means be full accountability for the Gupta networks in terms of their role in state capture and the pain they've caused South African people.
Hennie van Vuuren, director at Open Secrets. This is not the first and the last discussion we're having with you here on Salam Media. Undoubtedly, we're going to be talking lots more about state capture and a whole host of other issues going forward. Together, we can try and make a small dent in corruption and other misdemeanors by politicians and people who steal us blind here in South Africa. So lovely talking with you this morning. And as I've said, we will be following this developing story with you at Open Secrets. Thank you indeed for your time. Go well.
Thank you, Julie.
That was Hennie van Vuuren, Open Secrets, talking about the extradition, the possible extradition of the Gupta brothers to come to South Africa and account for all of their heinous crimes and misdeeds. 9:36 exactly. In a minute or two, we'll be joined by the DA Shadow Minister on Appropriations, and that is Ashore Sarupen, about the FBI looking into allegations of money laundering against Cyril Ramaphosa.